The Raidho X2t is a very big sounding speaker with a very small footprint, but its special qualities extend far beyond mere scale. Come along with me as I take us through all the technology that makes this small Danish floor stander much more than it appears. Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Michael Johnson and I have with me here in my listening room the Raidho X2t floor standing loudspeaker. Raidho Acoustics are a Danish loudspeaker manufacturer founded in 2003 and noted for their strict adherence to in-house construction, where everything from the drivers to the crossover to the cabinet are fabricated and assembled at their facility in Pandrup, Denmark. They are also innovators in driver materials and design, which I will talk about a little bit later when I describe what's under the hood of the X2t besides me. For most of Raidho's existence, they were headed by lead designer Michael Borison. But ever since Michael left to start his own company in 2017, Raidho had been working with a new cast of engineers, including Lars Goller, who previously owned Gamut Loudspeakers, and who worked as a designer for Dynaudio. The X series represents Raidho's kind of entry level. It has been in production in various models for a number of years now. However, the T moniker to the X2t is quite new, and it represents the company's most recent material innovation. The X2t is a slim, miniature-sized 2.5-way floor-standing speaker. It features a unique foil-patterned planar magnetic ribbon tweeter right here, and two 5.25-inch mid-bass drivers. The foil on the ribbon tweeter is only 20 milligrams thick, which is far less mass than most traditional ribbon designs, and has a sonic breakup point of 82 kilohertz. The two mid-bass drivers are quite interesting as far as materials go. The cone of the driver is made of aluminum, however, that aluminum is sandwiched between two layers of ceramic. On top of all of that, the drivers receive a top coating in a chemical element called tantalum, a type of refractory metal that is incredibly hard with natural chemical inertness and a very, very high melting point. This is where the T in X2t comes from. It also has resulted in the breakup mode of these mid-bass drivers being increased to 15 kilohertz. The drive system behind these woofers use a highly ventilated neodymium magnet system with a titanium voice coil. In this 2.5-way design, both drivers output bass frequencies, but only the upper driver handles mid-range. The front face of the speaker is cast aluminum. The port on the small floor stander is not the usual typical round port you might be used to, but rather a vented port, which Raidho designed to control the bass output in different steps and enhance the tuning of this speaker. Also involved in that endeavor is the cabinet shape, which is a wing shape that narrows to a point at the rear. This design is in place to help mitigate standing waves inside of the speaker cabinet. The feet of this floor standing loudspeaker are also ceramic and designed to decouple the speaker from the floor. Although I'm going to provide a little small gripe here, and that's that the feet are not adjustable, which I don't really understand. It makes it absolutely impossible to properly level the loudspeaker, let alone keep it fully stable on a floor that is not perfectly flat, which mine kind of isn't. I really shouldn't have to be sliding small pieces of kitchen drawer liner under a pair of $19,000 loudspeakers. And yeah, I did forget to mention, these little Danish beauties are $19,000 a pair. And that's only with the gloss finishes. If you want lacquered wood, that's going to cost you extra. Specs, however, are impressive. These speakers are rated down to 40 Hz plus minus 3 dB. They are also rated as four-ohm nominal. The X2t came with a very detailed setup instruction manual, and in my experiments, I found that these speakers are incredibly sensitive to placement and room acoustics. My listening space is kind of unique because physically it's only about 12 feet wide by 15 feet deep, but the right wall, which is behind me here, of my room is actually not a wall, it's a record shelf, and the room goes on into the kitchen for about another 10 feet. This did mean that there were a few hurdles in placing these speakers optimally. Raidho recommend that both speakers should be placed 9 to 12 feet apart. It's kind of a widespread speaker placement, and that they are more sensitive to rear wall interactions than sidewall, and that you can kind of place them closer to the sidewall. I ended up with these speakers about 8 feet apart, 2 feet from my sidewalls, and 2.5 feet from the rear walls. Roughly about 8 feet from my listening position. That's just how it worked out in my room. When I first set up and listened to the Raidhos, I felt I was experiencing kind of some bad room interactions. Noticeably, I had bass humps. I found this tends to be really, really common when placing smaller speakers that have really impressive bass specs. I encountered similar problems when I reviewed the Alta Audio Alyssa bookshelf speakers a couple years ago. Pulling the speakers away from the wall even further can definitely help, but realistically, the best solutions came in the form of room acoustic treatments. And for me, that was triangle bass traps, which did help to eliminate the accentuated bass frequencies and provided a much more even response that I was satisfied with. Once I did have the Raidhos positioned well in my room, well, as best as they could be in a small room like mine, I did start to marvel at just how much sound comes out of these small towers. These speakers are rated 87 dB efficient with a 4 ohm nominal impedance, and I ran them primarily with 2 integrated amplifiers. The first, my long-standing reference, the Raidho H2t, which provides 250 watts per channel into 8 ohms and 420 watts into 4 ohms class AB. I also ran it with the new-to-me Audia FLS9 integrated amplifier, which provides 150 watts per channel into 8 ohm, but a much greater 290 watts into 4 ohms, meaning this fully balanced amplifier is a very high current delivery amplifier. Both amplifiers drove the Raidho X2t with 0 issues or headroom challenges. The audio was generally a bit smoother, I would say, and a little bit more liquid in its presentation, while the Raidho specialized in impact and transient response. However, I found that the differences were very, very small, and this leads me to believe that the X2t is a speaker that is not particularly picky with amplifier voicing. As long as you feed in sufficient power, its natural character shines through very clearly on a number of different amplifiers.
I'm Dimitri Purcell, CEO of Advanced Paris, here in Montmartre, which is such a specific and close to my heart in situ location so that we can talk about the brand itself.
I'm really a music lover, and my job in working into the hi-fi business is the result of the quest of getting a great sound.
Advanced Paris is a really human and family company, and when you are a family and you want to grow your family, and our family will be the customers, the end user, we really want to share with them our passion.
And I will point out the natural character of this loudspeaker to me is very impressive. The sophisticated driver design implemented by Raidho pays off because it shows plenty of strengths with almost no weaknesses. The planar ribbon tweeter provides a very airy and extended high register with smooth detail while rendering an entirely non-fatiguing presentation you could just listen to for hours. The ceramic tantalum mid-bass drivers are impressively dynamic, not just for their size, but for any speaker in general. After an extensive break-in period, one of the first records I played was this Analog Spark reissue of the Cranberries' debut studio album, Everyone Else Is Doing It, So Why Can't We? I was simply dumbfounded once the opening track, I Still Do, kicked off, as it sounded like my listening room had more or less extended by multiple feet in either direction. The music was simply more open and inviting than I'd ever heard before. There was more room around the band members, and lead vocalist Dolores O'Riordan's signature kind of airy mezzo-soprano had this texture that felt so balanced and palpable, and it perfectly rode the line between detail and emotion. On the B-side track, Wanted, I was very impressed with how the drums were rendered, as the kick drum was able to sound sweet and juicy and plump without any boominess or unnecessary bleeding to the other voices. Meanwhile, the little touches of hi-hat and cymbals and all these little percussive elements were startlingly clear, without any glare, any glassy nature at all. On the later song, I Will Always, the bass truly plunged the depths in my room. I know these speakers are only rated to about 40 hertz, but my in-room response felt deeper. And the intermittent bass drum kicks on this slow burn song were felt viscerally and emotionally. Dynamic shifts were also handled with lots of grace. It was way easier to hear when the band was holding back versus kind of like going for it, especially on the song Still Can't, where there's always this subdued energy that at times feels like it wants to explode, but it never really gets there. All that musicianship, it goes unnoticed a lot of the time, but it's very apparent and easy to understand through this loudspeaker. Playing the audiophile favorite from Louis Armstrong, Satchmo Plays King Oliver, this proved to be another masterclass in how this loudspeaker can swing from subtlety to power and dynamics. The opening track, St. James Infirmary, instrumentalist sound is if they're in front of you, but more impressively, the quiet moments are just as clear and detailed as moments of super large sound, such as when Armstrong's very signature and distinct vocals just come to dominate the center image. These speakers do a great job of organizing chaos, and when the whole band comes in after Armstrong's vocal lines, there is a dynamic power there, but also when the dynamic power kicks in, every individual noodle from the trumpet, trombone, clarinet, it's presented with this lifelike presence. You can really get a sense of each player's personalities through their musical lines on the Raidhos. Switching gears to something more up-tempo, I played the startlingly well-recorded jazz funk fusion album Midnight Lover from the Japanese group T-Squared. This is one of a handful of domestic albums CBS Sony recorded digitally direct to disc in the late 70s, and this album has a hot, right off the board sonic character. The X2T proved their mettle with this album as the drum hits here were powerful, dynamic, and swift. The title track on side B has basically everything you want in a demonstration of what a small speaker can do in terms of dynamics. There's this subtle breathiness in the saxophone, moments of explosion with the whole band in a kick drum sound that is to die for. There's also this directness of transient response that lets the low distortion design of the X2T shine through. This speaker can deliver thrills, but the great thing about it, the great thing I found through my listening, is that it does so with this incredible finesse, and more importantly, it does it without any type of listening fatigue that often comes as a side effect when you mention all the positive qualities that I just mentioned above, but it's not here. For instance, the final cut on this album is just called This Song. There is a guitar solo that sounds like it's played on either a Telecaster or a Stratocaster, and you can hear energy coming right off the pickups, and even picture to yourself the type of amplifier that would be driving this really bright and edgy, crisp guitar sound. The X2T have remarkable bass handling capabilities. I have in my system a Rel T7X subwoofer, but for pretty much most of my listening with the Raidhos, I kept it switched off. When I did engage it, I didn't actually notice much further bass extension. What I did notice was a slight increase in scope and size of the soundstage, as well as just a bit more impact in those bottom octaves, but it wasn't a huge difference. And if you're in a smaller listening room like mine, you're probably not going to want or need a sub with these speakers. If you have a large room, a sub might assist with the kind of scale and fullness and pressurization that you might want, but that's just a benefit of a well-integrated subwoofer when applied to 99% of systems. There's nothing lacking in the X2T that makes me think that a sub is necessary with this speaker. One of the few times I actually did notice a discernible difference with the subwoofer on was playing this album right here, which is Two Dreams by Circus Survive. This album, mastered and cut by Sterling sound engineer Ryan K. Smith, has this massive and deep electronic sound, everything from synthesizers to manipulated drum sounds that will shake your room if you play them through a capable system. Without the sub, listening to this album, I was thrilled. I was taken aback at how much low-frequency energy the X2T could output. But when I switched on the Rel, I went from astonishment to fear as I wondered when my downstairs neighbors would finally decide that they had enough and burst through my door with police in tow. I wanted to highlight a recording that demonstrated other strengths of this loudspeaker besides just like slam and dynamics and bass, namely how it handled sound staging and also how it handled the color of acoustic instruments. For that, I turned to a vintage orchestral recording by the Orchestra Suisse Romand playing Beethoven's 7th Symphony under the baton of Ernst Ansermet. In this recording, the Raidhos presented this fantastic hall sound, one that extended deep, and let me marvel at the size and the scope of the symphony orchestra. Of note, like individual instruments sound completely open and natural in this presentation. This includes dynamic climaxes as well as the moments of intimacy, particularly heard on the third movement scherzo. There's a number of moments here in this movement where the horns and the clarinets come in with this sweet waltz-like melody. It's a big contrast to the rapid lines in most of the movement. And when that happens, I can distinctly place both sections on the soundstage. The horns do indeed sound farther back and more in touch with the rear of the space than the clarinets. Likewise, when the whole orchestra takes over the theme and those bright French Geneva trumpets come through at the fortissimo, the sound is live and direct and completely uncolored, unveiled, aside from the natural warmth of Victoria Hall, which is where this vintage Decca recording was captured. It may sound like I'm gushing about the Raidho X2t, but that's because I truly believe this speaker is one of the best examples I've heard of a compact design really kind of doing it all. It is at one time completely natural and uncolored sounding, but it brings out the rich details of any instrument it's presented with. Further, the design features work together to present a sound that is intoxicatingly spacious, three-dimensional, greatly pushing past the boundaries one thinks of with this driver and cabinet size combination. I will warn you though, this speaker is very sensitive to placement and room tuning. If you have a listening space smaller than mine, or even thinking about maybe my size too, you might be better served with one of the stand mount offerings in this X line. Even in my space, I kind of wonder if the sound put out by the X2t isn't just a touch too much, and if a smaller speaker would work better. If you have a listening room free of these limitations and with the ability to really explore and play with placements, free of room interactions, this small floor stander can and will do wonders. It has the ability to render every last ounce of your music while always doing so with a composed and sweet demeanor. Do not underestimate this speaker though. Both the bass and the dynamic response coming from these two 5¼ inch drivers is massive. A common saying in audio is that the laws of physics still apply. And this is usually done when advocating for larger driver sizes, larger cabinet sizes, or perhaps excusing the limitations of a smaller speaker. But the engineering on the Raidho X2t is marvelous, and it's definitely going to lead you to question that old adage. $19,000 is a lot of money, but in my opinion, Raidho have justified their cost here with an experience that leaves very few sonic stones unturned. But that's just what I think. What do you think? Please leave your thoughts down below, and don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons so that more video reviews just like this one show up right in your feed. Until next time.